Hi, everyone. Welcome to LearnUp Center's Wednesday webinars. And today we're talking about the 3 approaches to teaching reading in the way that LearnUp Center thinks about it in a structured phonics, directed reading, a whole language sort of continuum. And we're here with Steve Tattum to have a discussion about that. Again, I'm Steve Hagler. I'm Executive Director of LearnUp Centers. I'm here with Steve Tattum, who's the Reading Director and founder of Tattum Reading. LearnUp Centers is a nonprofit literacy center based in San Francisco on a mission to change how we teach all ages and types of learners to read. Today's webinar is on the 3 approaches to teaching reading. Next week, we will be working on spelling tips for everyone. That'll be Wednesday, June 17th at 3 p.m. California time. It is free, registration is required, and I'll send a link out in the follow-up email to this webinar. This webinar will be recorded if you want to watch it later. Meeting guidelines, thank you for being patient. Again, we're all working with new technology. Sometimes it works, sometimes we live by technology and die by technology. Thank you for your patience. We have a broad range of participants ranging from those who are just learning about reading and the science of reading and others who are extremely practiced in it. So we want to be able to include everybody. The chat will be off once Steve gets talking about his topic. If you have questions, you can send them to the host and we will answer them if they make sense to the time. We'll have time for Q&A at the end, and that'll be an opportunity for you to talk directly to Steve and ask your questions that way. And as I mentioned, this will be recorded. There's a handout on the 3 approaches to teaching reading. I'm still putting it together. I will put it in the chat in a minute, and I will send it out with the link with this recording. There are 4 ways you can support LearnUp if you'd like. You can recommend families to our Learning Center and to our tutoring opportunities. We do offer free reading assessments. We are doing them remotely. So it's an opportunity for a family to see where a child fits into our reading program and what we would do to work with that child. We are also looking to hire tutors. So if you're interested in that, please reach out to us about becoming a tutor for us. Spread the word. We're interested in developing a movement that helps kids of all types and backgrounds to learn how to read. And in today's world, where 60% of all 4th graders don't read at grade level, this is more important than ever. We are also interested in helping children who otherwise would not be able to afford our tutoring learn how to read with us. And so if you'd like to support those efforts, you can donate at learnupcenters.org. So Steve, are you ready to go?
Yeah.
Let me start my share, and you're good.
Okay. All right. Maybe a few errors here. This is something I just put together recently. All right. 3 approaches to reading. Basically, whole language has gotten a bad rap, and for good reason, because it has basically been used as a reading method to teach kids to read, and it's not a method. Whole language is reading. It's the goal of reading. It's where we want to get to, is whole language. And the whole language approach is just marvelous, and I've done it. I've actually taught workshops on whole language. Now, the reason I got into all 3 of these approaches is I was program director of Denver Academy for 35 years. And we had kids come to the school, elementary through high school, at a variety of reading levels. So we would have a division, the elementary school division, the middle school division, and high school. And in the elementary and middle school, I would teach a group of teachers how to do the systematic phonics program. Initially, it was alphabetic phonics. Later on, it was Tattum reading. But I would teach them how to do the systematic phonics. Then in the same division, we would have a directed reading approach, which is kids who had phonics or phonics was okay, but needed to apply syllables in words and learn about text, which is directed reading. And then in the same division, we'd have kids who could read pretty well and just needed to get turned on to reading and writing whole language. So each division had 3 different types of rooms: systematic phonics, directed reading, and whole language. And it just makes sense. What's the problem is there for a while, the way I look, it's like a triangle. You have systematic phonics as your base, then you have, directed reading, then at the top you have whole language. And what happened is the triangle got reversed and kids were getting whole language at the beginning and not learning systematic phonics. Okay. Well, that's where things get screwed up. But if you can be aware there's a natural development, and in some kids that development will be escalated or advanced, that will help you think about it. It has a lot to do with a child's linguistic abilities, and their ability to intuitively understand language and make connections in language. So let's just start in general. Systematic phonics is the best initial approach for teaching reading and spelling, according to over 50 years of research. Gene Chall in the 60s is the one who started analyzing programs. Back then, the DISTAR program was the dominant phonics program, and showed evidence that kids who had learned the systematic phonics through DISTAR were still ahead of all the others in high school in their reading. In other words, it produced measurable change that was noticed 10 years later. Okay. Since then, there's been studies after studies. Marilyn Jagger Adams in the 90s, the reading panel, and et cetera. There's been, Diane McGinnis has done tons of reviews of studies showing that systematic phonics is the best approach. Okay. However, students enter skill with various levels of language and inductive abilities. Those with higher language and inductive skills will learn to read with any method. This is why programs like Whole Language have research suggesting they're highly effective to reading. In other words, when you have a child who has good linguistic abilities and inductive abilities, they will learn to read any method. So in the higher socioeconomic group, that can be up to 70% of kids can learn to read any method they're taught. Therefore, you'll have research in these methods showing they're effective, and they are effective with 70%. However, these kids will have mixed spelling results. The 70% read in the higher socioeconomic will have a variety of different spelling issues as a result of not having the systematic phonics. Low socioeconomic, it's much lower. Maybe 30% to 40 can actually learn to read through a variety approach. But because often of lower language at home and other issues, many of these kids must have systematic phonics at the low socioeconomic. And even most fanatic whole language individuals will talk about, yeah, you need phonics in inner city or low socioeconomic. Okay. So one of the factors that was stated in whole languages is inaccurate, is that good readers read past the word and use context to get the word. That's why whole language as an approach will use the 3Q method. The 3Q method is, well, what makes sense? What sounds do you see there? They don't teach them systematically. So use what sounds you know with what makes sense, and the syntax, what parts of speech make sense. And the 3Q system will help you get the word. This is an inaccurate and dangerous approach. We now know that all good readers parse words into syllables and read past it to confirm. So they're not reading past it to get the word, they're reading past to confirm the parsing in the syllables. Now, how do we know that? We know that from eye movement studies. They actually just watch the eyes of students when they run into larger words they don't know. And they notice that the eyes will break the word into syllables. So good readers utilize syllable knowledge and word attack when confronted with unfamiliar words. Okay. They do not read past the word or use context to determine. Okay. In essence, there's no conflict between the three schools of thought. They are a natural developmental sequence. Systematic phonics leads into directed reading, which leads into whole language. At Denver Academy, as I mentioned, I taught all three approaches. In any school, there will be students capable of benefiting from whole language approach in first grade. This is why you need between 2 to 3 hours a day in first and second grade devoted toward reading and spelling. Remember the old adage, learn to read grades 1 to 3 and read to learn 4 to 12? Well, that's kind of changed. But the initial point was we spent time in the mornings learning to read. So if you have, let's be honest, there are first graders who can read Harry Potter entering first grade. Not that they should, that's intellectually and maturity above their grade level. But you have kids who can read very well. And so reading Biff and Tiff on the Hill is inappropriate. So ideally, teachers would teach phonics lessons, my program. They would teach my program up to reading and then break into reading groups. And they would have a beginning phonics group that would be in a beginning phonics book, a quicker, more advanced phonics group, who's in my higher books, and maybe a directed reading or whole language group reading the book. So they're learning the phonics for spelling and word attack, but they would be in a higher level books. I would still actually take the higher group through some of my higher books, possibly. But in other words, you can have 3 different groups. What is the difference in the approach? Systematic phonics is getting automaticity of the 44 sounds of the English language. And it's the application of the Z sounds as they're affected in a position in the syllable. So in the word camel, the A is closed in and it's short. Whereas the word latex, the A is open and it's long. So they have to learn this. They have to learn to parse large words into smaller syllables. They have to apply the knowledge of sounds and syllabication while reading. And then they have to apply the knowledge of sounds and generalizations for spelling and writing. That's phonics, and that's what I'm teaching you to do in my workshop. Directed reading is the reorganization of the 44 sounds into 6 syllables. And you're teaching morphological knowledge, prefixes, endings, suffixes. You're teaching them a structural analysis, how to break down vocabulary in short stories and novels. You're developing the elements of fiction and the analysis of stories. You're developing vocabulary and background. You're talking about text structures. You're teaching 9 essential comprehension skills. And you're responding to text with summaries and short essays. In other words, you're now reading to learn. And you're reading more about how to deal with a text. Whereas in whole language, you're now, a child has a pretty good understanding of text, and you're now getting the child to read in a variety of genres. So you'll have kids choosing books from a variety of different, fiction, nonfiction, fantasy, sci-fi, adventure. You're doing what are called reading conferences with the children's books. Librarians will come in and do book talks on books to expand kids' genres. Students will do book talks to expand kids' knowledge books. There's peer conferences on books, writing using a variety of genres, frequent one-to-one writing conferences, peer writing, editing, and students writing the books. In other words, this is now really getting a kid to become a writer and a reader. So it is a natural development from systematic phonics to directed reading to whole language. Okay. All right. So let's pause for a moment, give you a moment to look this over. We know the systematic phonics, but the directed reading to get a sense of the difference of what we're doing, and we'll go a little more in depth.
So I put the handout into the chat. And I also sent it by email to anyone who's registered at the time that this webinar started. So either way, if you're on the phone and you can't get it in the chat, then you can get it. Or if you're on an iPad, people say they have difficulties getting handouts, you can see it in your email and download it there. And Steve, it was sent to you as well.
So, again, studies are replete that the best approach to teach reading is systematic phonics and spelling. So this should be the base approach. However, you will have kids in that first, second grade who can already read and read well. And when you come to the reading component of the phonics program, you can then move them in to whole language and having them choose books and do conferences with books. Or you can have them get a short story book and do a directed reading with a group of higher kids as part of that class. But everybody is getting the systematic phonics. It takes anywhere from 1 to 2 years to get across a strong systematic phonics program. My program can be done nicely in the first year and reinforced in the second. This is in a first, second grade. Okay. All right, so let's look at directed reading a little more. Okay. All right, directed reading, the Magnificent Seven. Considering the complexity of the reading process, students need ongoing instruction even after they understand the essence of reading. Explicit instruction is essential for most students and will make reading more powerful for all students. This is by Founis and Pinnell. Though I differ with them on their initial approaches, I do like what they do in directed reading. Okay, so let's review what we discussed to date. First, a continuum in reading approaches exists that includes systematic phonics, sound approach and syllable, directed reading in a whole language. Which method is politically correct at a particular point in time is not what matters. And that's kind of what changes things, is what method appears to be the most popular and what ones are dominating the textbook situation at any particular time, rather than what the research is so clear on systematic phonics, yet for some reason it's still not the dominant approach. The dominant approach today is the 3Q system using whole language. Okay. Now, if you have a child with phonological and orthographic processing are deficit, you must do systematic phonics at all ages. If you have a phonological and orthographic processing at age appropriate, you still need systematic phonics, but fast-paced. That's why I do my test. Those of you who have been through my workshop know I have a diagnostic test to help determine what my start is. Now, there are kids with meaning and contextual processors show deficits, but kids do real well on phonological and orthographic processors. These are kids who can read anything. Some of them are called hyperdyslexic or hyperlexic, pardon me. They can read anything, but they don't understand what they read. These are kids who need primarily a comprehension approach, which I have covered in my workshop, and we'll talk a little more about. Directed reading in the whole language with an emphasis on meaning is what we need for these kids. When all processors are well developed and student is talented in word attack and spelling, the child should be in directed reading in the whole language. These 4 areas can be addressed with performance groups. Now, this is what we used in Michigan at Detroit Country Day. Their first, second grade would break up into performance groups, and one group would be at a certain level of the phonics program and move at a certain pace. Another one would be at another, and another one would be in a whole language group, and they would move, and then they eventually all merged together. But they broke up into performance groups across their grade level in order to address the different levels. That's the most effective approach. It's the same approach that's used in teaching Spanish or French or any other foreign language, where you would not even think of putting a beginning Spanish student with a Spanish 4 student. You, of course, have a Spanish 1 class. You have a Spanish 2 class. Well, the same would be the case in language. It's the same issue. Some people say, well, won't the group that's the slower group feel bad? Well, they're going to feel much worse in 3rd grade when they can't read. And the goal is to move quickly through this program so that they all are in regular reading groups. That's the goal. Okay. So here I talk a little further about it. These 4 areas can be addressed with 3 performance groups. The methodical systematic phonics group handles those students who need more phonological skill development. You're going to have kids in 1st grade who really are at a kindergarten level and are going to move at a slow pace. To mix them with a fast-paced phonics group would be disastrous for them and for the fast-paced group. The fast-paced group, you work with students who perform within a normal bell curve. They may finish the entire phonics program by February of their 1st grade. Whereas this group might take 2 years to get through the whole program. Directed and whole language group addresses groups that's described in numbers 3 and 4. These are kids who don't need phonics. They have comprehension issues or they're gifted. However, they still should get systematic phonics instruction for word attack so they can break down larger words like composition and location, and also to help their spelling. Okay, now in directed reading, we tend to organize the phonics in terms of the 6 syllables. And so the 6 syllables can be handled in what's called covers. Now there's 1 million words, but the 6 syllables covers all 1 million words, approximately, okay? And you have C for closed syllable. That is a single vowel is immediately closed in by a consonant. And you have words like at, it, sit, run, fit, hat, they're closed in. You have an open syllable. That's one that ends in a vowel, for example, lay and label. Phi and final. Open syllables, are example, are fe, tie, few, see, row, mute. Then you have vowel teams. Vowel teams are diphthongs, what I call first walkers and last walkers. Now, those of you who've been through my phonics program, note that I did not do green, yellows, and reds here. I simplified the vowel system for the 6-syllable approach. I've simplified it into first walkers and last walkers. And then those sounds that aren't included, I just teach the sight words. In other words, I simplified the vowel teams into diphthongs, first walkers, and last walkers. Again, many of these kids who are in directed reading will not have had my phonics program. They've had some sort of phonics. So what I'm doing is organizing what they know in terms of these 6 areas. Then you have endings and prefixes, which is E in covers. R is R family, and S is silent E. So when we do directed reading, we start with teaching open, closed, and silent E the first week of school, and we teach them how to vowel tag and vowel change. So we're teaching them how to break words down right off the bat. Okay? And this is talking about how we teach the vowel tag and vowel change, which those have been in my workshop know. So, your lesson looks like this. You have structural analysis where you are working with dividing words into syllables in order to make difficult words easier to read and spell. There are 6 kinds of syllables students must learn to recognize and break down. This covers. So we're reviewing these 6 syllables. And again, those who've been in my workshop, you can use words in quotes to review these 6 types of syllables. Now later on, I will be doing a workshop just on how to do directed reading. This is just an overview. Okay, just a brief overview. So with this, we'd introduce open, close, silent E, vowel tag, vowel change, and then we pull words from the book that the child's going to read. Whatever book it is, it can be Hatchet, it can be Stargirl, it can be a short story. We pull words and the child will then vowel tag the words, break them down, rotate, using their knowledge of the 6 syllables, okay? And then I will read these words in context and they will guess the meaning. We're teaching them that you can break words down and from context guess the meaning. Then I will have a couple sentences where I will have part of a word and the child will guess the word from context. The boy had a good reputation. He had a large sell of books and magazines. So they're using what they know and context to get the rest of the word. So we're teaching here in directed reading how to use word attack with context to get words. Then we check the student's background for the story. And the teacher might introduce a new concept using pictures, video clips, or cartoons to help get an idea of the background of the story. You can also use KWL, what do you know, what do you want to learn, and what did you learn, as part of the background new concept. You give a purpose, and then you do guided reading. Okay. Now in guided reading and guided comprehension, this is where you're introducing the thinking skills that I've talked about in my comprehension program. So this is where you're teaching a child how to picture, how to paraphrase, how to infer, how to draw conclusions. And this is best done through think-alouds. So in directed reading, the child will read a passage and I will model a think-aloud, like how to infer and how to predict. So a child will read to me and I'll say, based on what you're reading, I'm predicting that this is going to happen. And I infer the child did this for this reason. Then I will read to the child and they will do think-alouds. So we are teaching in guided reading how to use the thinking skills. And then we guide them through comprehension. Now we've talked about, there's a simple way of asking comprehension questions, which I will show in a minute, which is their questions, look and search and on your own. And then the last point is the Great Book Seminar. And in directed reading, a wonderful way to end a story or a novel is to do a seminar as described by Mortimer Adler in the Great Book Seminar, where you ask a question that causes kids to infer and think, and they write an answer quoting parts from the book, and kids share their answer to questions. This goes very nice in part of a directed reading. Again, this is a lot of information, but I'm just giving you a breakdown of what directed reading is. So in directed reading, we are uniting word attack, vocabulary development, teaching vocabulary and word attack. We're getting into background purpose. We're guiding them in comprehension and reading. And we're following up with in-depth thinking using seminar, possibly the Great Book Seminar. Okay. All right, let me get out of here for a moment. Okay, so in comprehension, it talked about 3 types of questions: a there question, a look and search, and on your own. There's 3 types of questions you can ask kids while they're reading. One is a there question, where you can put your finger on the question, like, who did it? And they can put their finger. Tom, when did it occur? 1920. Where did it occur? In New York. They can actually put their finger on it. A look and search is something that's on their own, and they will put 2 fingers next to their eye to show that it's in a couple places. So they'll look and search. On your own is something like an inference or a prediction question. So this is how I'll start questions in 1st and 2nd grade, is I'll start by giving practice and saying, okay, who is in the story? And the child will show me a finger because it's a there question. What was the weather like? Well, they might show me 2 fingers because it's in 2 places. Look and search. Was this a good or bad thing? They will show me all fingers on top of their head. So for comprehension, we can, as we're going through this, ask these 3 types of questions. And that's prelude to asking more sophisticated questions, okay? All right, let's pause here and have you look at the directed reading handout to get a sense. And again, directed reading does require time investment, but just to get a sense of how much different directed reading is than on my systematic phonics course. Just kind of look at that and formulate some questions before I go to whole language. Okay. All right. Now, let's take a moment here. Do we have this handout, Whole Language, Developing the Love of Reading?
Yes.
Okay. Rather than me read this, I just want to open with Nancy Atwell. The best book I've come across on whole language is Nancy Atwell's In the Middle. And this is where she did language with junior high kids, middle school kids. And I use that as my Bible when I worked with junior high school kids with whole language. Also, Linda Reef, who was a colleague of hers, showed how to do what Nancy Atwell did with individual books with a class book. So I found that Linda Reef's book, Seek Diversity, went hand in hand with Nancy Atwell's In the Middle. But Nancy Atwell shows how to run both a reading and writing workshop. And then Linda Reef shows how to do that with a class-wide novel. Again, this is a follow-up to phonics. So what I'd like us to pause for a moment and just read this article, which is like 2.5 pages, and look over the workshop, and then we'll discuss it. So we'll just take a minute to have you look over this article, okay? Starting with, there are 2 facts about reading that are generally known by professionals in the reading community. Go ahead and read that. You all have a copy of this, right? Darlene, do you have a copy? Okay, all right, I'm gonna go ahead and keep mine on the screen for you to read, and I'll move it up as we go. Okay. So this was my reading workshop that I did with high school students who would come, and we did two 15-minute periods. First thing in the morning at the start of the class. And then when they came in the morning, they would start, and then the last class of the day, they would do reading workshop. They do written responses, a summary, reaction, reflection. I do roving conferences where I record the number of pages read, gave positive comments on written responses. If after 15 pages the child wasn't in the book, we switched. I had purchased Atwell students' favorite books years earlier. I had the librarian direct students to that bookcase as a start. I had the librarian come in weekly to discuss books that the kids would get into. And we did the writing workshop on a daily basis. Okay. Mini lattice status class, writing workshop, and share. Okay. So this is an example of whole language. And my purpose in doing this is to put phonics into a larger context of reading. Because here's what I'm seeing happen. You get kids who learn to read phonetically, and then in middle school or upper elementary, they're not reading interesting books. They're analyzing stuff that's boring to the child, and the child's not actually getting any choice in his reading. The beauty of whole language is the child gets choice in reading and is stimulated to read a wide variety of books. And so what's happening is kids can learn to read and they don't like reading because they're just doing technical analysis of various books. So my view is it has a big part to play in our school system. It's part of the reading program. Okay. So that's a big mouthful here. So why don't we open it up for general questions on any topic related to systematic phonics, directed reading, or whole language.
Steve?
Yeah.
Two colleagues of mine joined in today who did not do the training, the 3-week training that we just finished.
Right.
Could you just talk a little bit more about how your phonics approach differs from others?
Sure. Absolutely. Well, let's go in. Let me give you a minute on phonics. Phonics goes back to the 1800s. The McDuffie readers were a phonetic-based program in the 1850s, 1860s. And then in the 1900s, I believe it was Dale Carnegie felt that there wasn't as much thought going on in phonics and moved to more of a sight word approach, So there's been back and forth, both phonics and whole language, sight word. Basic phonics now taught for kids are usually related to one of two systems. One is orton-gillingham, which was developed in the 40s, 30s, and 40s. And from that, you have Wilson, Slingerland, Project Read, Alphabetic Phonics, Barton, there's a whole slew of them. And then there was the LIPS program done by Lindenwood Bell, which is not being done as often as it used to be. That was more of an auditory-based system. And phonographics stems from that. It's a form of, it kind of came out of that school of thought. So these programs, the Orton-based programs, are based on a system that felt that the right hemisphere had a flip side of sounds, that sounds were inverted because we didn't have hemisphere dominance. And so you tied down every sound through what are called 8 linkages. So you might teach a sound a day, and over a month, couple months, you might have all the sounds. You start working them into syllables, etc. Well, my system moves at a much quicker pace. Okay, so let me So my system found that first organizes all the sounds into a simple pattern. You have the consonants, you have the vowels, and you have endings. The vowels I put together in what's called the Big Dipper, crescent moon, and the Earth, or the vowel galaxy. This is a Big Dipper, look in the sky, a crescent moon, and this is the Earth, green grass on top of it. We teach sounds in larger groups, and I have books that correlate with these groups. So I might teach all the consonants and short vowels day one with a child, and then put them into a book that immediately applies that. Then once they can apply that, I might have a book that does teaches them how to do this and this in 2-syllable words like velvet and cabin, and I have a book that does it. Then I teach all the R family and put them in a book that covers all the R family, and each book raises grade level. So my phonics program is teaching groups of phonics in larger groups and immediately applying it in reading. At the same point, we also teach endings for advanced books, Latin-based endings, and apply these in books as well. So in order to help with this, we have a quick survey we give. This survey, whoops. Okay, this survey, which helps tell where the child is at in their phonics program. So when I get a child who has a reading problem, I'll just take this last year. I got probably 6 or 7 second graders, or the end of first grade going into second, who after kindergarten and first grade still struggled on these 1-syllable words and could barely work the blends. They could read these words, and they read this word by word. It can be bad to get mad and have a, so they could read these, but had trouble with blends and didn't know silent E. Now, knowing that, I knew they were what I call a start to, and I put them into 1-syllable books that addressed, that worked on getting them more efficient in this system, and taught them the phonics necessary for that. At the same point, I tested another child who did well here, 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 all the way up and struggled in here. Well, this child would often be approached the same way in phonics programs, and they'd start him from the beginning. But I don't do that. I catch him up to where he's at in his sounds and give him credit for it. So that child can you see the board? So, first child, he could do the consonants and short vowels, and that was it. So I put him in a book that had the consonants and short vowels. But the next child could do consonant, short vowels, and R family, and these diphthongs, and these sounds, and could work out words. So I give him credit day one for everything he knows and put him in a book that addresses this, which may be the 5th book in a series. So we've day one moved which some programs wouldn't get into a year. And day one, we're way into our program. So this is where I differ than almost all the phonics programs, is my ability to diagnostically get a kid into the program quicker. Then to put it in context of what I'm talking about, that child would then, this child has finished this program and then move into directed reading, where I'm now working hatchet with 2 of the kids, and we're applying our reading skills into a novel once we finish this, okay? So where we differ from most phonics programs is the speed in which we teach the phonics and the diagnostic approach. In general, it takes 2 years to get 2 years growth with most phonics programs. We get it in 2 to 3 months. That's the difference. The other aspect that's different is I've written 8 reading series, and then another 3 I've worked with my son, so that we have a reading series for all kids, no matter what phonetic level. So I'll have a junior high kid who's a start 2, who's at 1-syllable words. But if I put him in my first grade book, he'd be bored to tears and insulted. Instead, I wrote a book called The Fog, which is more interesting. Let me see if I can show that. All right, so all right, so this is a child, let's say, it's called Ghost Ship, that is at 2-syllable words. He's a 7th grader. So we're working with 2-syllable words. The book's called Ghost Ship. He's going baskets, travel, river, comments, but the story is an interesting story about this ghost ship that comes in and wrecks a dock and's wrecking ships, and you have an investigation going on, but it's written at 2nd grade reading level. So the child in a phonics book that doesn't really realize it's in a phonics book. It's interesting stories. Notice this is written at grade 1.6. But it's an interesting story for the kids. So this series starts at 1st grade and goes all the way through 7th grade. So I have phonics books written that go with the phonics series that address the concepts. So that's how we differ. Does that answer the question? Okay. Other questions?
Yes.
Steve?
Yeah, Eulea?
Yeah, I teach ESL. I teach kindergartners and 1st graders, but not together, separate. And I teach them 40 minutes a day, and they're all different levels. Kids don't speak any English, kids do. So how would I use this program, the phonics part, to teach them the sounds and all that when they're all at completely different levels, and I only have 40 minutes to teach them every day?
Well, I'm not a magic man, but here's what I would do. I would basically start with the sounds, not letter names. So at the very beginning with everybody, I would be doing the movements. Have you seen my workshop?
I have. I was part of the 3 weeks.
Okay, so you've seen the movements. So
Yeah.
I would start with the movements with the kids, and
Okay.
I would actually follow the movements in the order of the cab. So you have the cab and the van. So you'd start with like C, T, A, B. I'd start the movements, and I'd start with the pre-primer work and start with the 4 consonants and vowels, and then with the group, try to get them to do somewhat of the lesson plan that is designated under the pre-primer with cab. Okay, let me show you what I mean by that. Because if you do that, you are working all the readiness skills.
Okay.
So, one second. All right, so if you're teaching the movements for like the cab, pre-boot camp. So notice teacher introduces, oh, you can't see that.
No.
Get better at this, by the way. Okay, so this is in the manual, the pre-boot camp. Teacher introduces BCSA. So you might be doing this day one, you might be introducing B, okay? And you're doing lots of work with B. And then you're doing K, and you're doing lots of work with K, okay? Then you're doing st, app. All right, now you have the sounds. You now can give the kids movable letters and say B, and they point to B. And say K, and they point to K. And then you can point to the letters and they say it. Just doing that is helping all the kids.
Yeah.
Okay, then you can, if you have mutable letters, show them how to pull out at and make it at b. Now doing that is working on segmenting, blending, manipulating sounds, which are the three things that prevent kids from reading if they can't do that.
Yeah.
Did you follow me?
Yes, I get it.
Okay. And so you do a little of that, then you go to reading where you're going to go at and they do it. And then the cab. Now to start this, you may be doing what's called the magic bridge. And the magic bridge is where you take a bridge, get a picture of a bridge and cut out pictures and have a picture of like a horse. And before you introduce the sounds, you'll take the horse and they'll go horse. They go over the bridge and they cut off the first sound. Then you'll have pig and they'll go pig and they cut off the first sound. And then they'll have cow and they'll go cow. So you get them to start cutting off the first sound from words. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And then once you can do that, see if they can cut out the last sound. Horse, bat. Okay.
Yeah.
Then you can also get pictures, 4 pictures, put them out, like a picture of a cow, a horse, a cat, and a dog, and go g, and they have to point to the word and tell you what the word is. Dog. Ow, and they have to point to the picture of the cow and go cow. So that is pre-work you can do before this to get them to cut off sounds and blend. So let me review that. So we're doing what's called magic bridge, where you have pictures and you're cutting off the initial sound as you go over the bridge. Kids love it, by the way. I'll give them and you can also use toys where you got a cow and they go cow. Make sure they cut off bat, b. So you're getting them to cut off that initial sound and then cut out the last sound. And then you're getting pictures to getting them to blend where you're having 4 pictures and you're going, house, and they have to go house and point it. Those are doing with the prerequisite skills of blending and isolating. Then meanwhile, you're teaching these sounds and then slowly working this lesson plan in. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Hello?
Yes, I'm
Okay.
here. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. That's a thought. There's also my colleague, Cheryl Rose at crsuccesslearning.com, who has a kindergarten program and an age 4 program that lays out daily lessons for an entire year. That's very good. crsuccesslearning.com, I believe it is. She has a kindergarten program that has a day-by-day exercise and also an age 4 pre-primer program that are excellent, that correlate with my program.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah, it's an excellent program you can look at. But right away, if you're doing Magic Bridge and the blending exercise and moving into the sounds, the key thing is that you're going through the sounds systematically. That's the key. All the kids need that. See, what happens what predicts first grade success is that the kid can spell and read 3-letter words that are phonetic. They can spell and read run, sap, hot, top, fit. If your child can spell and read 3-letter words entering first grade, that means they can segment, blend, and say sounds. So that's kind of your general goal, is to at least do that. Now, if you do that, then you can actually add blends and silent E in kindergarten. But if they can at least spell and read 3-letter words, short vowel words, you're on the right track.
Okay, yeah, that sounds good. What about the reading? Then they read the book as well, like during half the period?
Yeah,
Do they read-
if I got a kid in pre-boot camp, okay, and I've got them doing these letters, we finish up by actually reading the cab, which is, just has these basic letters in it. So then after reading the cab, we then have the next book is the van, okay? And then from there, you could move into the Ferris wheel, or by the First Steps program, which is what I use, or boot camp, which is what I use for kindergarten. We have a set of kindergarten books. But yeah.
And if I want to, if I have to teach them like phonetic words that aren't phonetic, like the word the, how do I incorporate into the lesson for them to know what the word the is, or some other word that's not phonetic that they wouldn't figure out from sounding out?
Need a lot of practice. One is can they print?
Yeah.
Okay, if they can trace the word the multiple times and then write it next to it, and then write it from memory, and then put it on a card and have them review it on a daily basis. Just each day have them read the word the, but start by having them trace it, then copy it and write next to it. And then on a daily basis, have them read the word the, and then have the word the and have them find it on the page, like show them the word the, and then see if they can find it on the page, the word the, and point to it and read it. But basically, you're going to develop, you can develop a group of word cards for these sight words, like a, the, and, that kind of thing.
Yeah. And how many should I teach like per week? Like maybe 2 a week?
If they can handle that. Some kids can't even handle that, some can. You basically could follow, if you're using my book, The Cab, follow the sight words in the cab. Like the is one of the sight words in the cab. So in other words, correlate your sight words to the cab and the van.
Okay. And in which part of your lesson would I incorporate the sight word? Where would I introduce it? In the spelling of words?
The sight words you would do when you move into reading. So before you go into reading, you would practice those sight words.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good.
All right.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Steve, can I jump in?
Sure.
Sure, great. This is Eileen. I love the explanation in terms of, and what I would say to the previous person, the thing that is so powerful is that, particularly with that mixed group kindergarten or mixed group first grade ELL, this doesn't hurt anyone. It's necessary for many, and it's absolutely mandatory for some, right? So the idea that a kindergartner who also is an English language learner would be so advanced but still qualify for English language learner support, it's just unlikely that they would be so high that they wouldn't benefit and enjoy this. And just in the first letters that you introduced, take Spanish, for example, you've got both the C and the S, which are confusable for a Spanish speaker who maybe has started to read some words in Spanish. There's so much going on that those kids need to be working on, that it's just this structured, explicit exposure instruction is just such a gift, because it doesn't leave anything to chance. We know that our ELL population is under referred for special education services up to 3rd grade and over referred after 3rd grade. So by being able to employ this explicit systematic instruction early, if they happen to be an ELL student who also has a learning disability or dyslexia and we don't know it yet, you know, again, it's just such a gift. So that was just a comment I wanted to make. In terms of the books, I'm wondering if you or others have kind of cross-referenced your books at all to some of the books that lots of us are seeing being offered for free right now, the Flyleaf books or Dog on a Log or other series. And I'm just wondering if, in addition to the Tattum reading books, if there are other books that align pretty well as essentially supplements or additional books at that level.
Absolutely.
You know, there's only so many words that you can make with CAT, so you know there must be a number of them that kind of support your CAB book.
Yeah, no, I mentioned that. In fact, the Moondog series, which I gave people information, which is a multicultural series, is wonderful and correlates with my program pretty well. The only difference is they start with 3 short vowels and a few consonants, where I start with just short and a consonant. But one could very easily adapt my program with the Moondog series. And the Flyleaf has good stuff. Yeah, my books are not the only game in town. So you can, you know, it's a matter of, once you get familiar with my scope and sequence, just trying to make sure that the books are, for the most part, covering similar information. But you certainly can add other materials, not a problem.
Right. I just am pointing out, you know, particularly in the budget climate that we're all finding ourselves in right now, it's pretty terrifying. That, again, as educators, we already spend so much of our own resources that if we can identify books that, again, tick the multicultural box, tick the, you know, the alignment, you know, just the more bang for the buck. And
Exactly.
a lot of kids need more practice or benefit from more practice. So the idea that one could have your books and also 1 or 2 other series, and a district may also already own them, is really powerful.
Right. I agree. Totally. Yeah.
Thank you.
Other questions? You're welcome. Other questions?
I'd just like to make a comment. The word "the" actually does sound out because the TH sound is first, and the E is a schwa sound, which down the road you're going to be teaching that anyway.
Sure. I agree. Yep.
I also have a question to ask you. You showed, I think you called it a survey, and it was listed in a book that you have. Is there any way of, is that survey like an assessment? Would you call it an assessment? You're calling it a survey.
My reading survey? Yeah, that's a survey I use to place in my program.
Yeah. Is there any way of getting a hold of that? I looked on your website. I used the word assessment though, and I didn't see anything.
No, it's just part of the lessons book. So, and the key to it is in the lessons book. So you could, I mean, you're interested in just that survey?
Yeah, I really am.
Okay.
I have students that I need something like that for.
So Linda, why don't you reach out to me directly at learn2read@learnupcenters.org, and we can talk about how to get that to you.
Okay, thank you, Steve.
Yep.
Can I jump in there on that though, Steve? Steve Tattum, isn't your survey is directly linked to your program? So the utility of that survey for other purposes, could you speak to that?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it is a direct correlation to my program. However, one could do my survey with any phonics program and go, well,
Yeah.
the kid doesn't know his short vowels and consonants, or he
That's right.
doesn't. But you know, it's more directly linked to mine.
Right.
Mhm.
It would work with what I do.
Yeah. You know, the key thing is if somebody knows phonics well, then when you look at the survey, it's pretty clear what I'm addressing. You know, some things are silent E, some are dealing with teams, diphthongs. Right. Good point. Other questions?
With the reading survey, they would be diagnosed like boot camp level if they couldn't sound out like half the words, or? like pre-boot camp and boot camp? Because we talked about how if they could do that first section, their start one, or they
Right.
struggle up.
If they cannot do the first group of words at all, or hardly, I then check their sounds. And if they don't know their consonants or vowels, I mean, if they know nothing, they're at boot camp. That means, they're at the cab. That means I teach 4 consonants and short ad day 1. And I do that pre-boot camp lesson, and I'm in the program. We've had several kids start that way. But if usually their consonants need cleaning up and they know some short vowels, I may start them in Ferris wheel with the consonants and a short A book, and then a book, which moves quicker if they already have a little background. So that's where I have to go into the book and see. Like if I go to the cab and he can read it without a problem, I would then necessarily go to the Ferris wheel. Or my boot camp, my boot camp has double the amount of books as the Ferris wheel. But but if they're at a start two is the beginning. It's out of the boot camp. It's the beginning in all my series. So the series you buy from me, it's the beginning. In your books, start 2 is the beginning of Carnival for a first, second grader, non-reader. Or if they're 3rd, 4th, or 5th or higher, it's the adventure series. Okay. Yeah, you just kind of move straight through those books. And then if you have a high start 4 who's older, you may go into Pep Baker, which I'm going to be working with junior high kids. So, yeah, so you just kind of go based on the testing. Other questions?
Can I ask a question about the book?
Sure.
When are you going to be selling them digitally?
We're in the process now, thanks to Jen and others. I had to get these from the printer and they're in an actual form. So we've got to get them set up properly. So we're in the process of doing it. For instance, we have a couple people who won a contest that we owe some series to. So as soon as we get these up and running, we'll send those to them. But I'm not exactly sure the time frame. Jen, I don't know if you can speak to that, or Steve.
As soon as we can make it happen. I mean, there's a lot of demand, so we'd like to make it happen, but we want to make sure that they're downloadable and that you can print them properly. So it'd probably be another week, I would imagine, but we'll get there very quickly.
Okay, great. And those will be for purchase.
Correct. If you were in the training program, you got some materials for free. And then if you want to purchase hard copies, you have to do that through the Tattum reading.com. And then these digital downloads will also be for purchase. They're basically the digital version of the hard copy books that are for sale currently. And then those will be available both off the Learn Up website and also off of Tattum Reading.
Terrific, fantastic.
Okay. Anything else?
Steve, I have a question. Well, actually, I have 2 questions. The first is, when students are reading nonsense syllables, if they know the word, but they're going, or they know the nonsense word, but they're going kind of slowly, what would you do with that?
Well, it depends. Like, where are we at? Are we at 1 syllable words, like cap?
I'm working with a 2nd grade student, and he's very, first of all, he's has some attention issues, and you can see the wheels going. I think he knows the sounds, but he's really not totally engaged.
Okay. Yeah, that's maybe a whole different issue there then. You know, maybe just a lack of energetic involvement is part. One thing that helps is timing with the diagnostic syllables. Beat the clock, where I time them on reading the syllables, and we keep trying, and I coach them. Hey, you did it 15 seconds. Now try it at 14. I do that daily with my paragraph reading for kids, and it's highly motivating where let's kind of beat our time. So I would go to the diagnostic syllables with him. And if he's, let's say he's at concept 4 and he's going flip, click, plop, flip, slip, and then he does it in 22 seconds, I'll say, okay, you got it in 22. Let's see if we can get it in 19. Great job. Let's see if we can get it. So I try to coach them to go quicker. Now, some kids early on are having trouble putting words together. Like they'll go, b, ah. If it's that kind of thing, I'll glue the vowel to the initial consonant and we'll go bat, bam, bat, you know, and to help them with their blending. Okay.
That's a great suggestion. And my second question is, when he's spelling syllables, sometimes he'll grab the wrong letter, and he knows the motions very well. So I'm tutoring him through the internet remotely. If I show him the movements, is that doing any harm, or should he just know what the sound or what letter goes with the sound?
Okay, because he's having trouble getting the wrong letter. So you're saying like for yeah, you go ahead and do the movement for yeah when you get it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I do that. If a child has trouble with a sound while we're doing it, and let's say he's having trouble with X, R, L, Y, I'll be going, and I'll go for those sounds. And then when I point, I want to see if he remembers them.
Okay.
So I'll slowly wean away, but initially I'll go ahead and do the movement to help him get the sound. Absolutely.
Yeah. And sometimes I'm not sure if he's just not hearing, if there's a delay in the computer, if we're not clear. So I help him that way.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay. Any other questions? If not, we will close. Next week, we're doing a spelling workshop on tips for everyone. You might have anybody interested in spelling. We're going to be doing, a lot of things like the tails, the long vowels, orthographic mapping. It'll be a goofy words, all kinds of stuff. Okay. All right.
And then we are working on a new training for July. So look out for that. That'll be up and running. And we look forward to seeing you next week. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.